Have you ever stopped to think that human evolution isn't just something in the past, like some of that happened ages ago?
Yeah, or that, your own mind is kind of fixed.
Exactly. But what if it's actually happening right now, maybe even faster, and our brains are, well, surprisingly adaptable, especially with this whole digital world?
It's a really powerful idea. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at this fascinating mix of human evolution, intelligence, consciousness, and of course, modern tech's impact.
That's right. So our mission here is to unpack how our bodies, and maybe more importantly, our cognitive skills are still changing.
And how different generations, well, how they're dealing with all this information flying around.
And what it all could mean for, the future of how we think.
Right. And to do that, we've pulled together insights from, well, a whole range of places: psychology research, evolutionary biology, neuroscience findings.
Even discussions happening right now in online communities, which can be surprisingly insightful.
Definitely. Our goal is really to give you a shortcut, a clear view on this really crucial topic.
Looking at the subtle but powerful ways our minds and behaviors are adapting. So let's jump in.
Okay.
So this common idea, you hear it sometimes, that human evolution has sort of stopped, especially in developed nations. Some public figures even say it's over for us.
Yeah, you do hear that, but the sources we looked at paint a really different picture.
How so?
Well, the key thing is evolution is fundamentally an ongoing process. It happens whenever reproductive success isn't random.
Even if conscious choices are involved, like who we choose to have kids with.
Exactly. Even that plays a role. And some scientists are actually arguing it's happening faster than ever now.
Faster than ever. Wow. Okay, that's a big statement. Is there evidence for that?
There is, yeah. If you look at recent physical adaptations, it's pretty compelling. Take lactase persistence, the ability to drink milk as an adult.
Right, I know about that one. Common in Europeans.
Exactly. But it only evolved around 11,000 years ago, mainly in Northwestern Europeans. And it seems linked to inventing cheese and yogurt.
Ah, so culture drove the biological change. Because it gave a survival advantage, especially when crops failed.
Precisely. It shows how intertwined our biology and culture really are. It's not one or the other.
And you see that speed elsewhere, too.
Oh, definitely. Malaria resistance is a stark example. In places like the Cape Verde Islands, significant resistance evolved in maybe 20 generations.
20 generations. That's incredibly fast in evolutionary terms.
It really is. Especially on Santiago Island, where malaria is most common, the resistance is highest. It's natural selection in action, quite recently.
Are there smaller changes, too? Less dramatic ones?
Yeah, there are these microevolutionary changes. Like there's this artery in the forearm, the median artery. It used to be less common in adults, but its prevalence has actually increased recently.
Any idea why?
Well, the speculation is it might relate to modern demands on our hands, maybe tool use or even keyboard use, but it shows adaptation is happening even on that small scale.
And it goes even deeper, right? Down to our genes.
Right down to the genes. Studies looking at hundreds of thousands of people are finding genetic shifts linked to lifespan.
Like what?
Well, for instance, the ApoE allele, which is linked to Alzheimer's risk, it's found less often in older women.
Interesting. So selection against it, maybe?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And another one, the CHRNA3 gene tied to smoking addiction seems to be decreasing among middle-aged men.
So our modern lifestyles, our habits, they're directly feeding back into our gene pool.
Absolutely. It connects to this idea called the grandmother hypothesis.
Okay, what's that?
It's the theory that living longer, past reproductive age, actually benefits your descendants. Grandmothers helping raise grandchildren boosts the family's overall success. So genes promoting longevity could be selected for.
But isn't there sometimes a trade-off, like living longer versus having kids?
Yes, exactly. There seems to be a trade-off between longevity and fertility. We see it in trends where people with higher education and income tend to have children later in life. It's like balancing those evolutionary pressures.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's shift to the brain. This is where I think it gets really counterintuitive.
Agreed. Because despite all our technology, complex societies, everything, human brain size has actually decreased in the recent past.
Decreased? Seriously?
Yeah.
Our brains are getting smaller.
Yeah.
That feels completely wrong. How is that possible when life seems so much more complex?
It is surprising, isn't it? But it suggests maybe evolution is shifting gears. Perhaps future brain evolution isn't about sheer size anymore.
So what then?
It might be more about efficiency, subtle changes in neurohormonal regulation, how our brain chemistry works, optimizing the wiring rather than just adding more hardware, so to speak. It's likely a response to technology and how our societies are structured now.
Okay, optimization, not just size. So, thinking back, what drove our intelligence in the first place? Why did we get these big brains to begin with?
Well, there are a few key theories. One is sexual selection, that intelligence and things like language, music, art evolved partly as a way to show off fitness, like a peacock's tail, but cognitive.
So smarts were sexy, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. They signaled good genes, problem-solving skills, creativity, all attractive qualities.
Makes sense. What's the other angle?
The other major driver was likely the need to navigate complex social groups. Living together, cooperating, competing, that requires serious brain power.
In tools, language.
Absolutely crucial. Tool use allowed us to access new foods like cooking meat, which provides more energy for brain development. And complex language lets us coordinate, share knowledge, build culture. It all snowballed.
Which brings us neatly to consciousness itself. How are our sources defining that? It's such a slippery concept.
It is. They generally define it as what it is like to be an agent. It's about subjective experience, things like qualia, those raw feelings like the redness of red, intentionality, self-awareness.
And there was this interesting quote, "We are not born as selves, but have to learn to be selves." What does that imply?
It implies consciousness isn't just something that switches on at birth. It's conceptualized more as a higher order thing that emerges from our activities, our interactions, our learning.
And it can influence our bodies, like mind over matter.
Yes, that's the idea of downward causation. Our conscious thoughts and intentions can genuinely affect our physiology. Think about the placebo effect or how meditation can lower stress hormones. That's consciousness influencing biology.
And society shapes this emergence of consciousness.
Very much so. Education, social norms, discipline. These aren't just about behavior. They actively mold how we think, how our consciousness develops, and these patterns get passed down through generations.
Are the things that only consciousness can do? Cognitive tasks.
That's a really active area of research. Some potential candidates include really flexible attention modulation, handling completely novel situations robustly, genuine choice and decision-making, integrating diverse sensory info seamlessly, and embodied cognition, how our body shapes our thoughts.
And this idea of conscious supremacy.
Yeah, it's a concept suggesting there might be types of computation or problem solving that are fundamentally unique to conscious processing, things current AI, for example, can't replicate, like quantum computing versus classical computing, but forethought.
Okay, let's pivot now to the digital revolution, because that's arguably the biggest force reshaping our minds right now. You hear this term, digital natives.
Ah, yes, Mark Prensky's term. People born after 1980, supposedly native speakers of tech, versus the digital immigrants born before.
Right. But is it accurate?
Well, here's the kicker.
Right.
Research pretty much shows it's a fallacy.
Really? How so?
Just growing up around technology doesn't automatically make you skilled at using it effectively. Young people often overestimate their digital abilities. They pick up lifestyle skills, social media, gaming, sure.
But not necessarily work skills.
Exactly. They often lack crucial skills needed for the job market, like effective email communication, using spreadsheets, critical information evaluation. It's a big gap.
That's a really important point. So this constant immersion, what's it doing to, say, our attention?
Well, human sustained attention is inherently limited. We can't focus indefinitely.
And smartphones are attention magnets.
Or maybe attention shredders, all the notifications, the endless scrolling feeds. It leads to what some call perpetual partial attention. You're kind of always paying attention to everything, which means you're not fully focused on anything.
Just constant distraction.
Pretty much. And it has consequences. Studies link passive social media use just scrolling, not interacting with lower well-being.
And what about the link with ADHD symptoms?
There's an observed association between heavy digital device use and ADHD symptoms. Now, it's crucial to say this is a correlation. It doesn't mean phones cause ADHD.
Okay, so it's not direct causation.
Right. It more likely suggests they can mutually reinforce each other. Distractibility might lead someone to use devices more, and that use might further impair attention. It's a cycle.
What about multitasking? People feel like they're great at it when they're juggling devices.
Yeah, heavy media multitaskers might perform better on certain multitasking tests, but there's a catch. That variability might also shorten overall attention spans for focused tasks.
And the impact on kids is particularly worrying, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Some concerning studies show that extensive screen time in preschoolers is correlated with poor development of the white matter, tracks the brain's wiring, connecting key language areas.
Like Broca's and Wernicke's areas.
Exactly. And also linked to lower executive functions planning, impulse control, and weaker literacy skills down the line.
Wow. Okay, so beyond attention, how does social media affect our emotions and decisions?
The stimuli we get from social media directly tap into the brain circuits involved in decision-making and emotional processing.
How so? Any specific examples?
Well, researchers have looked at online social exclusion, being ignored or rejected online. In adolescence, this can trigger noticeable reactions in brain regions involved in emotional and sensory processing. It's almost like the brain processes it similarly to physical pain.
That's intense. And are there physical brain changes linked to usage?
There are associations, yes. Some studies link heavy social media use with reduced gray matter volume in the amygdala.
The amygdala, that's central for emotion regulation, right?
Exactly. So decreased volume there could potentially impact how well someone manages their emotions, though again, it's complex.
Okay, this leads us straight into AI. It's becoming ubiquitous. How is it changing cognition?
Well, on the one hand, AI tools can be incredibly helpful for complex cognitive tasks, analyzing huge data sets for medical diagnoses like IBM Watson, or helping researchers sift through information.
That's the assistance part. But what about cognitive offloading?
Right, that's the other side of the coin. When we let AI do the complex thinking for us.
And you might think, well, isn't that just like using a calculator? Or Google? How is AI different?
That's the question everyone's asking. Calculators do arithmetic, Google finds information, but AI can potentially synthesize, analyze, even generate complex arguments or creative text.
So it's doing a higher level of thinking for you.
Potentially, yes. And the concern is if we overly rely on that, does our own ability to think critically, to reason, to synthesize, does that atrophy?
Like a muscle we stop using.
Sort of. There was a great discussion on Reddit about this. One user asked, isn't cognitive offloading just trust, like trusting your car to work?
That's an interesting comparison.
But another user pointed out a key difference. Trusting a car is trusting mechanics. Trusting AI output is trusting information, trusting its reasoning. And if you don't evaluate it critically, you risk just becoming, well, gullible.
Accepting whatever the AI spits out.
Right. The consensus seems to be AI is a fantastic tool if you use it actively. Engage with it, question it, use it to augment your thinking.
But not passively.
Exactly. Using it passively, just taking its answers without scrutiny, that's where the potential downsides lie. You really need to stress test what AI gives you. Check its sources, its logic.
That's a crucial point. Let's move into our last segment. Adaptability, stress, and where we might be heading. You mentioned the brain is plastic.
Incredibly so. Neuroplasticity is this fundamental property. Our brain's structure and function can change based on experience. It's why we can learn throughout life or recover abilities after injury.
It's not fixed after childhood.
Not at all. Although different brain systems mature at different rates. This creates sensitive periods.
Like for language.
Language is a classic example. Much easier to learn fluently in early childhood, gets harder after maybe age 7 or so. The visual system's sensitive period is really early, first 6 months.
And early life experiences can affect these periods.
Yes, and this is fascinating. Research suggests adverse experiences early on, like exposure to violence or neglect, can actually change the timing of these sensitive periods.
How?
It might accelerate the development of brain circuits related to threat detection, making kids hypervigilant, but it could simultaneously delay the maturation of areas needed for language and executive functions.
That makes a grim sort of sense, adapting to survive a harsh environment first.
Exactly. And here's something really counterintuitive. Some studies found that individuals who had more unpredictable childhoods actually performed better on certain cognitive tasks as adults, specifically tasks requiring mental flexibility or shifting between rules.
Matter. How?
But only when tested in uncertain, changing environments. It suggests that early unpredictable stress might, in a way, tune the brain to be better at dealing with instability later on. It's context-dependent adaptation.
But we need to be careful here, right? This isn't saying childhood adversity is good.
Absolutely not. We must distinguish this from toxic stress. That's strong, frequent, prolonged adversity abuse, chronic neglect, violence, extreme poverty, especially without supportive relationships buffering the child.
And that is harmful.
Unequivocally. Toxic stress can disrupt brain architecture, affect organ development, and lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, and physical and mental health. Even things like chronic neighborhood stress are linked to poor cognitive outcomes and altered emotional processing.
Okay, shifting slightly. Why do we have cognitive biases? Things like favoring immediate rewards or assuming things will stay the same.
Well, evolutionary psychology offers a framework called error management theory, or EMT.
Error management.
Yeah, the idea is that natural selection didn't necessarily shape us to be perfectly rational. It shaped us to make the least costly errors in terms of survival and reproduction.
Okay, give me an example.
So imagine hearing a rustle in the grass. Is it predator or just the wind? Mistaking wind for a predator is a small cost, you get spooked. Mistaking a predator for wind could be fatal. So we might be biased towards assuming danger.
Exactly. Or think about avoiding disease. We might be overly fearful that strangers are infectious, less costly error than getting sick, but maybe overly optimistic about our own hygiene preventing illness.
What about social biases? Like judging people quickly, the fundamental attribution error might fit here. That's our tendency to attribute others' behavior to their personality rather than their situation. EMT might suggest this bias helped us quickly categorize people as potentially good or bad social partners, avoiding those who might exploit us, even if we were sometimes wrong.
Makes sense from a survival perspective. Okay, so pull this all together. Evolution continues. Our brains are plastic. Technology is changing us. AI is here. What's the path forward? How do we keep skills like critical thinking sharp?
Especially when using AI, right? Well, one approach being discussed, particularly in education, is assessing critical thinking more directly. Not just looking at the final answer, but how a student got there.
Like explaining their reasoning.
Exactly. Using assessment rubrics that evaluate the process, or even having students do verbal defenses of their work, forcing them to articulate their thinking and adapt if conditions change. You can't just passively rely on the AI then.
And it's not all doom and gloom with technology, is it?
Definitely not. There are huge positives. Well-designed educational video games can absolutely boost learning and engagement.
And for older adults.
Yeah, game-based digital training programs show real promise for improving cognitive functions like attention and processing speed in the elderly. Some studies even show these interventions can increase cortical thickness in relevant brain areas.
So active, purposeful use of technology can be beneficial.
That seems to be the key distinction, active engagement versus passive consumption.
Okay, so we've journeyed through quite a lot today. Ongoing evolution, physical changes, our shrinking but optimizing brains, the double-edged sword of digital tech and AI.
And the incredible plasticity of our minds, shaped by everything from childhood stress to the games we play. The big takeaway, I think, is that our minds are absolutely not static. How we interact with the world right now is actively shaping who we are and what we're capable of.
Which leads us to the final thought for you, the listener. As technology rockets forward, we face a really fundamental choice, don't we?
We do. Will we let passive reliance on tech, on AI, potentially erode core human skills, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, deep focus?
Or will we consciously choose to use these powerful tools actively, to leverage them, to enhance our cognition, to deepen our understanding, and to guide the ongoing evolution of our minds in a positive direction?
Yeah, considering your brain is constantly changing, constantly adapting through neuroplasticity, and AI is becoming deeply woven into the fabric of society. How will you choose to engage? What conscious choices can you make today to ensure your own deep dives into knowledge remain truly enriching?
Fostering that critical thinking, that emotional connection, rather than letting the very skills that make us uniquely human sort of fade away.
Yeah.
Something to think about.